Welcome to Storytime Narrations. Tonight's story is entitled The Light of Livia's Lantern. Enjoy listening. Livia always had a knack for finding beauty in the smallest of things. As a child, she'd spent countless hours in her grandmother's garden, marveling at the way the light filtered through the leaves, turning the world into a kaleidoscope of colors. Her grandmother, a woman of simple means but boundless wisdom, would often say, "Livia, my dear, the light you see outside is nothing compared to the light you carry within. Never let it dim." Those words stayed with Livia as she grew up, even as life's responsibilities began to weigh heavily on her. In her mid-30s, Livia found herself juggling a demanding career, a young family, and the care of her aging parents. The days seemed to blur together, each one filled with tasks that left little room for the simple joys she once cherished. The garden where she once found solace was now overgrown, and the lantern her grandmother had given her, a symbol of the inner light she was to nurture, sat on a shelf, gathering dust. It wasn't that Livia was unhappy. She loved her family dearly and took pride in her work. But there was an emptiness she couldn't quite shake, a sense that she was missing something important. The vibrant, curious girl she'd once been seemed like a distant memory, and in her place was a woman who was constantly tired, always rushing from one obligation to the next. One evening, after a particularly exhausting day, Livia found herself alone in the living room. The house was quiet, her children finally asleep, and her husband working late. She sat on the couch, staring blankly at the wall, her mind buzzing with the never-ending to-do list that had become her life. Her gaze wandered to the shelf where her grandmother's lantern sat, its brass frame tarnished with age. On a whim, Livia stood up, walked over to the shelf, and picked up the lantern. It felt surprisingly heavy in her hands, its weight somehow grounding her. She brushed off the dust and noticed that the small compartment for a candle was empty. A memory surfaced, her grandmother lighting a candle in the lantern every evening, saying it was a way to keep her inner light burning bright, even on the darkest days. Inspired by the memory, Livia searched the house for a candle. She found one tucked away in a drawer, a leftover from a long-forgotten holiday. She placed it inside the lantern and lit it, watching as the flame flickered to life, casting a warm, golden glow around the room. The light danced on the walls, and for the first time in a long while, Livia felt a sense of peace. As she sat with the lantern, memories of her grandmother flooded back, her gentle voice, her wise words, and the way she always seemed to find joy in the simplest things. Livia realized that she had been so focused on the demands of her life that she had forgotten to nurture her own spirit, to find the light in the small moments of each day. The next morning, Livia made a decision. She would set aside time each day, no matter how busy she was, to do something that brought her joy. It didn't have to be anything grand, just a few moments to herself to read a book, take a walk in the garden, or simply sit quietly with a cup of tea. She would light the lantern each evening as a reminder to keep her inner light burning, to find beauty in the everyday, and to nurture the part of herself that had been neglected for so long. At first, it wasn't easy. The demands of her life didn't suddenly disappear, and there were days when it felt like there wasn't a spare moment to be found. But Livia was determined. She started small, waking up a few minutes earlier to sit with her coffee in silence, before the chaos of the day began. She began tending to the garden again, pulling weeds and planting flowers with her children, teaching them to see the beauty in nature as her grandmother had taught her. As the days passed, Livia noticed a change. She felt lighter, more present, more connected to the world around her. The small moments of joy she carved out for herself began to add up, filling the emptiness she had felt for so long. She started to see beauty everywhere, in the laughter of her children, in the kindness of strangers, in the way the sun painted the sky with colors at dusk. One evening, as she sat with the lantern in her garden, watching the fireflies dance among the flowers, Livia's husband joined her. He had noticed the change in her and had been curious about the lantern she lit every night. "This is new," he said, sitting down beside her. Livia smiled, the light from the lantern reflecting in her eyes. "It's not new, actually. It was my grandmother's. She always told me to keep my inner light burning, to find joy in the small things. I guess I forgot that for a while." Her husband nodded, understanding. It's easy to forget when life gets so busy. Livia reached for his hand, squeezing it gently. I know. But I'm trying to remember. It's made all the difference. They sat in comfortable silence, watching as the lantern's light mingled with the twilight. Livia felt a deep sense of contentment, knowing that she had found her way back to herself. The burdens of life hadn't disappeared, but they no longer felt so overwhelming. She had learned to carry them differently, with grace and a renewed sense of purpose. As the months passed, the lantern became a central part of Livia's life. She lit it every evening, sometimes alone, sometimes with her family, always with gratitude for the light it represented. It became a symbol not just of her grandmother's wisdom, but of the strength and resilience she had found within herself. Word of Livia's lantern began to spread through Maplewood. Friends and neighbors, curious about the changes they saw in her, would ask about it. Livia would share her story, not as a prescription, but as an invitation, a reminder that each of us carries a light within, one that can guide us through the darkest of times if we take the time to nurture it. One particularly beautiful spring day, Livia organized a small gathering in her garden. She invited her friends, neighbors, and family to join her in lighting candles, each flame a symbol of the light they carried within themselves. As the sun set, the garden was filled with the warm glow of dozens of candles, a testament to the beauty and strength that resided in each person there. Livia stood among them, her heart full as she looked at the faces of the people she cared about, illuminated by the light of the candles. She knew that life would continue to bring challenges, and that there would be days when the light seemed dim. But she also knew that as long as she took the time to nurture it, that light would never go out. As the evening came to a close, Livia's husband wrapped his arm around her, pulling her close. "You've started something beautiful here," he whispered. Livia smiled, leaning into him. "I didn't start it. I'm just continuing it." Together, they watched as the lanterns and candles flickered in the night, a sea of lights dancing in the darkness. And in that moment, surrounded by the warmth of her family and friends, Livia knew that her grandmother had been right all along. The greatest light was the one she carried within, and it would guide her through whatever came next. The light of Livia's lantern became a beacon of hope in Maplewood, a reminder to everyone who saw it that no matter how dark life might seem, there is always a light within that can lead the way. The end. And so we have come to the end of tonight's program. I trust you had a nice time listening. If you did, like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Also feel free to make comments in the comments section. Till we meet again, stay blessed.